Good day to you. I hope you're doing well today. I hope you're having a good week so far. Here at the church building, we've been fortunate enough to have Horizons, virtual Horizons, so we couldn't go to camp to Freed Hardman. But thankfully, the people that were going to have lessons, they did lessons and put it online and allowed us to watch them here at the building. So I've been with the teenagers all this week, which has been good for me and good for Morgan, because this summer we really haven't been able to do things like that. I'm used to going to gospel meetings and to vacation Bible schools and being with kids all summer, and that hasn't been the case. So it's been good for us to be able to be with each other, still socially distanced in the annex, but just to be in the presence of one another outside of regular worship times. It's been good. Last week our thought came from Horizons, and this week our thought again is coming from Horizons. Reed Swindle, the preacher out of Corinth, Mississippi at the Foot Street Church of Christ, had a lesson with a split group, so it was just for the guys, and this was just for the guys, and I thought he had a good thought, so I thought I would take it and run with it. Let me ask you, when have you seen confidence in yourself? When has there been a time where you felt really good about yourself? Maybe you just had a promotion at work. Maybe you've been working your way up and your boss says, you know what, you've been doing a good job, and here's a reward, some kind of reward for it. Maybe it's with your kids. You've seen your kids have a choice to do the right thing or the wrong thing, and they've chose to do the right thing. I'm sure that's given you confidence as a parent. Maybe as a Christian you've brought someone to Christ. Maybe you've had a spiritual conversation with someone that has led to them wanting to know who Jesus was. Maybe that's made you more confident in yourself spiritually and in your spiritual life. I want us to think about that as we go to this passage. I want us to think about confidence. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 14. Exodus chapter 14. And overall, we're going to be looking at verses 1 all the way down to 14. But I'm going to start in verse 1 and read through verse 5 right now. Exodus chapter 14, starting in verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pihahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in the front of Baal-Zephon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. And I will get the glory over Pharaoh and all his host. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And they did so. A lot of people get caught up on this phrase that God says, "And I will harden Pharaoh's heart." So people ask the questions of, did God take away Pharaoh's choice? Did he harden Pharaoh's heart when it was soft? Did he control Pharaoh's body, taking control away from Pharaoh? And I think of that phrase, hardening someone's heart, and I think of how I have the power to harden someone's heart. Just think about this. If Morgan and I wake up and we're having a great day, usually she wakes up and after she goes through her morning routine, she's real chipper and happy, and I know she is. And I know how to harden her heart. And this is what I mean by that. If I tell her, you know what we need to do today? We need to spend all day cleaning the house and doing laundry and doing things that neither of us really want to do. Her chipper spirit is going to change. And I know that. I think of children, how my parents had power over me to harden my heart. If I woke up and they said, you know what you're going to do today? You're going to go to the doctor and you're going to get a shot. That was a good way to harden my heart and to change my whole mood. So that's why they usually said, you're going to the doctor, you may or may not get a shot. We're going to go for ice cream afterwards if you do. Basically, they knew how I would react if they told me that I was going to get a shot. And God knew the same thing here. God knew when Pharaoh was, when he released the Israelites, that his heart would be hardened and he would react in following them. So that's what God means by hardening his heart. Going on to verse 5. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people. And they said, "What is this we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" So he made ready his chariot and took his army with him, and took 600 chosen chariots and all other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel, while the people of Israel were going out. My version says they were going out defiantly. Other versions say that they were going out, or they were leaving Egypt boldly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them and camped at the sea by Phahathroth, in front of Baal-Zephon. So, going back to verse 5, it says, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people. And they said, "What is this that we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us?" I think of Pharaoh in the lead up to this. You have the 10 plagues, all of these things happening to Egypt, all of these bad things. And Moses saying, if you let the people go, all this can stop. And finally the breaking point came when Pharaoh lost his child. And he said, "You know what? I can't handle it anymore. I don't want you here." So he let him go. And now, since he's made that decision, he's getting lots of pressure from people. People are saying, "Who is going to build for us? Who's going to build these bricks and these houses and these buildings for us?" Let's go back to chapter 12 real fast, and we'll look at something else. Chapter 12, starting in verse 33, it says, "The Egyptians were urgent with the people to send them out of the land in haste." So send them out in haste. "For they said, 'We shall all be dead.' So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls being bound up in their cloaks and on their shoulders. The people of Israel had also done as Moses told them. For they had asked Egyptians," listen to this, "for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so they let them have what they asked. Thus they plundered the Egyptians." So not only were they leaving, so Egyptians didn't have their slaves, they didn't have their workers, but also they were leaving with their gold and their silver and their fine clothing. So they looked at Pharaoh and they said, "Hey, why'd you let them go with all of our stuff? And why did you let them go? They're our workers." And I think of how so many people are under pressure today. This week I heard of a sports team changing its name, not necessarily because it wanted to, but because of pressure. A lot of their merchandise have been taken out of major stores. So of course they were pressured into making that decision. And I think of how Pharaoh here is pressured into the decision of chasing down the Israelites, chasing down the people who had left with their gold and silver and their workers that had gone. So they pursued them. Going to verse 10, starting in verse 10. Before we read this, I want to ask, at the beginning I asked, when is a time that you have felt confident? Now my question is, do you know of a time when your confidence has left you? A moment where you haven't felt confident at all. For me in college, a time where I didn't have much confidence is I had a tendency to cram for tests. So the night before, you're looking at 3 or 4 hours, staying up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then at 9 o'clock you have a test. So sitting there cramming and just honestly memorizing all of the stuff just to regurgitate it back on the test. And when I go to bed at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I felt pretty confident that I had memorized all the stuff. But as we know with cramming, or as I know with cramming, you wake up the next morning and you're still feeling confident. You walk in, you sit down, and the test is put in front of you. And everything that you've crammed and everything that you've memorized is just gone. So you're sitting there looking at a test, and you don't know half the answers on the test because all of your cramming was in vain, was for nothing. I remember those moments of walking in the door and being confident and being ready and feeling like I was ready, and then sitting down and getting the test, and how my demeanor changed and how I was the farthest from confidence I think that I've ever been in some tests, in some cases. Read with me, starting in verse 10. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." So, you go back earlier, you go to verse 8, and it says, "While the people of Israel were going out boldly," or some translations say defiantly almost, maybe with an arrogant nature. Then you jump down a few verses, and they're looking at Moses and saying, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness?" I would say their demeanor changed a little bit. Going back to, let's see here, chapter 12 and verse 40, we read that the time that the people of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. So they had been slaves. They had had no control over their lives for 430 years. Thinking of that in today's time, it would be like a certain group of people being enslaved, listen to this, in the year 1590, and them coming out of bondage in the year 2020. So imagine a people that had not ruled over themselves. For us, it would be since the year 1590. That's before the United States was even a thought, before the United States was even conceived. So these people felt pretty good. They had taken gold and silver and clothes, and they were just walking out of Egypt. They were just being let go. And then all of a sudden their situation changes, and they're not being let go. And the confidence that they once had is gone. And they look at Moses and they start blaming him. They want to look at someone to blame, and Moses is that person. Keep reading with me in verse 13, and it says, "And Moses said to the people, 'Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again.'" Listen to this in verse 14. "The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." So Moses looks at these people and how their situation has changed, and he says, the confidence that you had when you walked out, the confidence that you had in yourselves, and even more so, the confidence that you had in God, Don't lose that confidence that you have. Because it says here, He will work for you today. The Lord will fight for you. And you have only to be silent. Thinking of myself and my own confidence. As a Christian, one of the most confident times of my life was when I became a Christian. I was lost, and then through baptism, I became saved and whole and right with God. And I remember that feeling of thinking that through Jesus, I was going to change the world. That with me, Jesus was going to bring everybody I knew to Christ. And I remember a confidence that was unshakable, or that I thought was unshakable. That being years ago now, I can say that there have been moments where that confidence has gone away to none at all. It's flowed, it's moved up and down. My confidence has not stayed the same. I think a lot of us are like that in our walk with Christ. And looking at that and looking at myself, it's not because God has changed or God has moved. It's because my situations have changed. And I think of the Israelites and how their confidence was based off of the situation. Yeah, when they were leaving Egypt, of course they were confident and even arrogant a little bit. But when that situation changed back, their confidence in themselves and their confidence in God left. I encourage us all for us to make sure and for us to try to make our confidence consistent, that it stays the same, no matter the situation. Because that we know that God will work for us and that He will fight for us. And we don't have to be super turbo amazing Christian either. God expects us to do His will, to be faithful to Him, to be more like Him, and to shine our lights, and to show other people who Jesus is. And I'm afraid our confidence changes as our situations in life change. So my question for you today is, where's your confidence? Where's your confidence in yourself? And even more so than that, where's your confidence in God? My challenges for you this week, for us this week, is to examine ourselves and our confidence in God and how He works in our life. And also my challenge is for us to look at the rest of this chapter. So starting in Exodus chapter 14, starting in verse 15, and reading the next 15 verses, 15 all the way down to 30. And through this, we get to see how God brings confidence back to His people and how God brings confidence back to us. I love you. And like I've said many times before, give me a call if you ever need anything. I hope you have a great day.